There comes a season in a woman's life when the room gets quiet. The phone doesn't ring as often, the circle gets smaller, or disappears entirely. And the world is quick to label that loneliness as weakness. But what if this phase isn't a breakdown? What if it's a breakthrough? What if a woman without a friend isn't empty, but being rebuilt? This is not a story of loss. This is a story of power forming in silence. There is a moment in a woman's life when the silence becomes impossible to ignore. The laughter fades, the messages slow down, and the familiar comfort of having someone to call disappears. At first, this feels like punishment. The mind starts asking painful questions. What did I do wrong? Why am I alone? Why does everyone else seem to have someone? But this is the moment where most people misunderstand what's really happening. Loneliness is not arriving to destroy her. It's arriving to refine her. When a woman is surrounded by people, especially friends who constantly affirm her, distract her, or soften every uncomfortable truth, she can go years without truly meeting herself. She adjusts, compromises, and performs versions of herself that fit the group. She laughs when she doesn't feel like laughing. She listens when she should speak. She stays quiet when her soul wants to scream. Connection feels safe, but it often comes with invisible contracts. Be agreeable, be available, be understood without making others uncomfortable. Over time, those small betrayals of self pile up, and the woman doesn't even realize she's slowly abandoning her own inner voice. Then the circle disappears, and suddenly there is no one to distract her from herself. At first, the silence is loud. It exposes every fear she buried under conversations and companionship. Regret surfaces. Old wounds resurface. Insecurity shows its face without warning. This is why most people run from being alone. They fill their time with noise, relationships, and endless stimulation because being alone forces honesty. And honesty is uncomfortable before it becomes empowering. In solitude, a woman is forced to sit with her thoughts without filters. She begins to see patterns she once ignored. She notices how often she gave more than she received. How often she tolerated disrespect just to avoid being alone. How often she silenced her intuition to keep the peace. This awareness can hurt, but pain with clarity is far more valuable than comfort with illusion. The loneliness is not trying to break her spirit, it's stripping away what never belonged to her in the first place. Without friends to lean on, she starts developing emotional self-reliance. She learns how to calm her own storms instead of outsourcing her peace. She figures out how to motivate herself when no one is cheering. She becomes her own safe place. And this is powerful because a woman who can stand alone cannot be controlled by fear of abandonment. She no longer stays where she is not respected. She no longer begs for attention. She no longer confuses attachment with love. This phase also sharpens her intuition. With fewer outside voices influencing her decisions, she starts hearing her inner guidance more clearly. She feels when something is wrong before it becomes obvious. She senses misalignment early. She learns to trust her gut again because she has no choice but to listen to it. And intuition, once rebuilt, becomes one of the strongest forms of intelligence a woman can possess. What looks like isolation from the outside is actually an internal upgrade. Her standards rise quietly. Her boundaries become firmer without being loud. She stops explaining herself to people who never intended to understand her. She stops proving her worth to rooms that were never meant to hold her. And in that stillness, her identity becomes clearer. Not the version shaped by social roles, but the version rooted in values. Loneliness also teaches discernment. When you've experienced silence, you stop craving shallow connection. You'd rather have no one than have people who drain you, compete with you, or secretly resent your growth. You become selective, not because you think you're better than others, but because you finally respect your energy. You understand that access to you is earned, not automatic. Most importantly, this season builds resilience. A woman who has faced life without a support system knows she can survive uncertainty. She knows she can rebuild from nothing. She knows she can carry herself through emotional winters and still emerge stronger. And that confidence doesn't come from words or affirmations. It comes from lived proof. So when the world looks at a woman without a friend and assumes she is lonely, broken, or lacking, it misses the truth entirely. She is not being punished. She is being prepared. The silence is not empty. It is full of lessons, strength, and clarity. This phase is not the end of her story. It is the chapter where she stops being shaped by others and starts becoming who she was always meant to be. There comes a powerful shift when a woman realizes that no one is coming to save her emotionally. At first, that realization can feel heavy, even frightening. The absence of a friend means there is no instant reassurance, no quick validation, no familiar voice telling her she's right or that everything will be okay. But inside that discomfort lies a transformation that changes the way she relates to herself forever. This is the moment where dependence fades and self-trust is born. For a long time, many women are taught, directly or indirectly, to measure their worth through connection. Approval becomes a currency. Being liked feels like safety. Being needed feels like value. So when friends disappear, it can feel like identity loss. She may question her choices, her personality, even her worth. But over time, something remarkable happens. Without external validation to lean on, she is forced to consult a deeper authority, her own judgment. She begins to ask herself better questions. What will they think? But what do I think? Not will this make me accepted, but does this align with who I am becoming? These questions change everything. Decision making becomes more intentional. She starts noticing how often she once ignored her own needs just to keep relationships intact. And now, with no one to impress, she feels a quiet freedom she's never known before. In this space, confidence stops being performative. It no longer comes from compliments or agreement. It comes from consistency with her values. She does what she says she will do, even when no one is watching. She keeps promises to herself. She learns that self-respect is built through action, not affirmation. Each time she chooses what's right for her over what's comfortable, trust in herself deepens. Without friends to mirror her emotions back to her, she becomes emotionally fluent. She learns to name her feelings instead of escaping them. She sits with sadness instead of numbing it. She processes anger without projecting it. This emotional maturity gives her power. She no longer reacts impulsively just to feel seen. She responds with intention because she understands herself better. As self-trust grows, her tolerance for misalignment shrinks. She stops over-explaining her boundaries. She stops justifying her standards. She doesn't need approval to walk away from what feels wrong. This is where a woman becomes grounded, not cold, not closed, but rooted. She knows who she is, and she knows what she will no longer accept. This inner stability changes how she shows up in the world. She listens more closely to her instincts when meeting new people. She doesn't rush into connections out of fear of being alone. She allows relationships to develop slowly, from mutual respect rather than emotional hunger. Because when you trust yourself, you don't need to cling. You can observe. You can choose. Self-trust also rewrites her relationship with failure. When something doesn't work out, she no longer sees it as proof that she is flawed. She sees it as feedback. She adjusts instead of collapsing. She learns. She adapts. She becomes resilient, not because life gets easier, but because she knows she can handle herself through difficulty. Over time, the need for validation weakens. Compliments are appreciated but not required. Criticism is considered but not absorbed. She becomes less reactive to opinions because her sense of self is no longer outsourced. This doesn't make her arrogant, it makes her peaceful. There is a calm confidence in a woman who knows she can trust her own compass. Eventually, when friendships do return, and they often do, they are different. She doesn't enter them seeking completion. She enters whole. She doesn't give from emptiness, she gives from overflow. She doesn't lose herself in others because she has already found herself alone. A woman without a friend who learns to trust herself gains something far more valuable than approval. She gains sovereignty over her life. And once that is built, no absence can shake her and no presence can control her. When a woman finds herself without a friend, the world around her grows quieter, but something inside her grows louder. The absence of constant conversation, advice, and emotional exchange creates a rare kind of space to think, to feel, to observe. At first, this silence can feel uncomfortable, even empty. But over time, it becomes fertile ground. In that stillness, an inner world begins to take shape. One that is strong, disciplined, and deeply self-directed. Without social noise, her thoughts are no longer interrupted or influenced by other people's fears, opinions, or expectations. She starts noticing what truly matters to her, not what she was told should matter. Her values become clearer, her priorities sharpen. She becomes more aware of how she spends her time and energy, and she begins to protect both more fiercely. This awareness is not accidental. It is the result of uninterrupted self-reflection, something few people ever allow themselves to experience. In this quiet phase, she stops reacting and starts creating. Instead of constantly responding to messages, problems, and emotional demands, she turns inward and asks, "What do I want to build?" That question is powerful. It shifts her from survival mode into creator mode. She begins investing in her mind, her body, her skills, and her future. She reads more. She thinks deeper. She plans instead of drifts. The silence gives her the mental clarity to focus without distraction. As her inner world strengthens, her standards naturally rise. She becomes less tolerant of chaos, inconsistency, and disrespect. Not because she is angry, but because she is at peace. Peace changes what you're willing to tolerate. She no longer entertains relationships that require her to overextend, overexplain, or compromise her self-respect. The more she enjoys her own company, the less she fears walking away from anything that threatens it. This season also teaches her emotional discipline. Without friends to vent to or lean on, she learns to process her emotions internally. She reflects before she reacts. She chooses growth over impulsive release. This discipline gives her control, not over others, but over herself. And self-control is one of the most underestimated forms of power. A woman who can master her inner state is not easily shaken by external chaos. In silence, she becomes observant. She watches people more carefully. She listens between the words. She notices patterns instead of isolated moments. This makes her wiser in future connections. She no longer falls for potential alone. She pays attention to behavior. She doesn't rush intimacy. She allows trust to be earned. Her discernment becomes sharp, and that protects her from repeating old cycles. The strongest shift happens when she realizes that solitude is no longer something she needs to escape. It becomes something she values. Her alone time is no longer a waiting room for life to begin. It is where her life actually deepens. She enjoys her routines. She honors her rhythm. She becomes comfortable with her own thoughts, which means she is no longer afraid of silence in conversations or gaps in relationships. She does not chase presence because she is already present with herself. When people eventually enter her life again, they encounter a different woman. She is not seeking distraction or validation. She is seeking alignment. She is not impressed by attention alone. She looks for consistency, respect, and emotional maturity. Because she has built a rich inner world, she does not hand out access easily. Connection becomes intentional, not impulsive. This is why a woman who has learned to thrive without a friend becomes powerful in every room she enters. Her energy is calm, grounded, and self-contained. She does not need to prove herself or compete for attention. Her presence speaks because it is rooted in self-knowledge and inner stability. What the world may mistake for isolation is actually evolution. The silence did not weaken her, it trained her. It taught her how to stand alone without feeling empty, how to choose herself without guilt, and how to build a life that does not collapse when people come and go. A woman who has cultivated her inner world through solitude carries a strength that cannot be borrowed, copied, or taken away.